My stepbrother laughed as he kicked my suitcase onto the porch, telling me I was homeless. He thought my shaking hands were from fear. He didn't know they were shaking because I was holding back a laugh, because the crumpled paper in my pocket wasn't just going to save this house, it was going to destroy his entire life. When the notary read the will, he didn't just lose the property, he found out a secret my father had kept for 30 years. Justice was about to get very loud. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and comment below where you are listening from. Let's get into it. My name is Angel Rivera. I'm 24 years old, and to the outside world, I look like a ghost. I live in Orlando, but no one ever sees me. I dropped out of college. I have no social life. My entire existence has been confined to the four walls of my parents' house, listening to the rhythm of my mother, Maria's breathing machine. For years, I was her nurse, her maid, and her anchor. But to my stepbrother, Jason Miller, I was just a leech. Jason was 29. He drove a luxury car, wore $1,000 suits, and carried an air of arrogance that filled every room he entered. When our father passed away, I didn't even have time to grieve. 2 weeks after the funeral, Jason stood in the middle of our living room, looking around like a real estate agent inspecting a teardown. He looked me dead in the eye and said, "Angel, I'm selling the place. Pack your things. I'll pay for a motel for a week, but after that, you're on your own." I almost dropped the tray of medicine I was holding. I whispered, "Jason, Mom lives here. This is our home. She's sick. You can't just move her." He stepped closer, invading my personal space. He poked a finger at my chest and said, "This world belongs to people who work, Angel. You do nothing. I make money out there while you live here for free. Dad is dead. The house goes to the successful child. That's me. You are just a burden." He expected me to cry. He expected me to beg. But in that moment, something inside me snapped, not from sadness, but from pure rage. I remembered the words my father whispered to me on his deathbed, words Jason never heard. Jason thought I was unemployed. My father knew I was doing the hardest job in the world. So I didn't scream. I just nodded and said, "Okay, Jason, but let's do this legally. We go to the notary. I'll sign the papers there." He smirked, enjoying his easy victory. Finally, he said, "You know your place." The next morning, we were at the notary's office. Jason sat with his legs crossed, checking his expensive watch, looking bored. When Mr. Harrison, the notary, walked in, Jason immediately spoke up. "I'm in a rush. Let's get the transfer papers signed so I can get this girl out of my hair." Mr. Harrison looked over his glasses at Jason. Then he looked at me. There was a strange glint in his eye. He placed a thick file on the table with a red seal. The label read, "Last Will and Hidden Assets." Jason frowned. "What is that?" Dad was broke. All he had was this old house. Mr. Harrison slowly opened the file. The air in the room dropped 10 degrees. He said coldly, "Mr. Miller, your father had a side you knew nothing about, and it seems there is a lot you don't know about Angel either." Jason's confident smile began to fade. Then, the notary dropped the first bomb. "Regarding the deed to the house, your father did not leave this property to Jason Miller." Jason shot up from his chair. "What do you mean? I'm his only son!" Notary Harrison leaned back in his chair, crossed his arms, and let the silence hang in the air before continuing with a firm voice. "You are not his only son, Mr. Miller, but you are definitely not the heir to this house. According to your father's will, the entire property goes to Angel Maria Rivera with no conditions attached." Jason stared at him as if he had just heard a foreign language, then turned to me, his face red with fury, and he roared, "This is impossible. Angel has done nothing. She hasn't earned a single damn dollar while I've been out there building my life." I sat quietly, my hands folded in my lap, and for the first time in years I felt my spine straighten, not from pride, but from a deep, exhausted relief that I had held back for so long. Mr. Harrison slowly flipped through the pages and said, "Your father left very clear words in his will, and I quote, 'I leave this house to my daughter Angel, not because she earned money, but because she sacrificed her youth, her dreams, and her health to care for her mother while everyone else looked away. She is the only one who truly understood what family means.'" Jason laughed bitterly, a laugh that sounded desperate, and he slammed his fist on the table. "This is ridiculous! She manipulated him. She influenced him when he was old and weak." The notary raised a hand to silence him, and his voice became icy. "Mr. Miller, this will was created 5 years ago when your father was still completely healthy, and it was certified by 3 independent witnesses, so please spare me your conspiracy theories." Jason gasped for air, his confidence beginning to crumble, but he tried again. "Fine, then we'll challenge the will. I have lawyers, I have money, I'll make sure she gets nothing." I felt something release in my chest, and for the first time in this conversation I spoke. My voice was calm, but carried weight. "Jason, you can try, but you should know that Dad didn't just leave me the house." Mr. Harrison nodded and pulled out another document from the file, this one sealed with a blue stamp, and he placed it carefully on the table between us. Jason's eyes darted to it, his jaw clenched, and he snapped, "What the hell is that?" The notary cleared his throat and said, "This, Mr. Miller, is a property deed for a second piece of real estate that your father owned, one that he purchased quietly 15 years ago and never told anyone about except Angel." Jason's face went pale, the color draining from his cheeks as if someone had pulled a plug, and he whispered hoarsely, "What second property?" Mr. Harrison continued methodically, "A commercial building in downtown Orlando, currently valued at approximately $2.7 million, generating monthly rental income of $18,000, and according to the trust your father established. Angel has been the legal beneficiary since she turned 18. The room spun around me even though I was sitting perfectly still, because while I knew about the house, I had no idea about this building, and my father had never mentioned it to me directly, but now it made sense why he always told me to trust the process and never worry about money. Jason stood up so fast his chair fell backward and crashed to the floor, and he pointed a shaking finger at me, his voice breaking. "You knew! You knew all along, and you played dumb. You let me think you were poor and helpless." I looked him straight in the eye and said quietly, "I didn't know about the building, Jason, but I did know that Dad loved me enough to protect me from people like you." His face twisted with rage and something else, something that looked like panic, and he turned to the notary. "There has to be a mistake. Check the papers again. My father would never cut me out completely." Mr. Harrison's expression softened slightly, and he said, "He didn't cut you out completely, Mr. Miller. There is a provision for you in the will." Jason's eyes lit up with desperate hope, and he leaned forward. "See? I knew it. What did he leave me?" The notary pulled out one final page, a single sheet of paper with just a few lines of text, and he read aloud, "To my stepson, Jason Miller, I leave my car collection, my personal belongings, and a cash amount of $50,000, with the hope that he will one day learn that success is not measured by what you take, but by what you give." Jason stood frozen, his mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water, and then he exploded. "50,000? A car collection of old junk? While she gets millions?" Mr. Harrison closed the file with a definitive snap and said, "The will is legally binding, Mr. Miller, and unless you can prove your father was mentally incompetent at the time of signing, which you cannot, this distribution stands." Jason grabbed his jacket and stormed toward the door, but before leaving he turned to me one last time, his voice dripping with venom. "You think you've won, Angel? You're still nothing. You're still the girl who wasted her life playing nurse, and no amount of money will change that." I stood up slowly, my legs feeling stronger than they had in years, and I said, "You're right, Jason. Money won't change who I am, but at least I know who I am, and I can sleep at night knowing I earned every single thing I have by being there when it mattered most." He slammed the door so hard the windows rattled, and then it was just me and Mr. Harrison in the quiet office. The notary smiled gently and said, "Your father was a wise man, Miss Rivera. He knew exactly what he was doing." I nodded, feeling tears building behind my eyes, but not from sadness, from something much deeper, and I asked, "Mr. Harrison, can I ask you something?" He gestured for me to continue. I took a deep breath and said, "Did my father ever talk about me? About why he did this?" The notary's eyes softened and he reached into the file one more time, pulling out a sealed envelope with my name written on it in my father's handwriting, and he handed it to me. He left this for you, Miss Rivera, with instructions that you should read it after the will was executed. My hands trembled as I took the envelope, the paper worn and yellowed as if he had handled it many times, and I whispered, "Thank you." Mr. Harrison stood and extended his hand. "Your father also left instructions for the management of the commercial property. There's a trust attorney who will contact you this week to go over the details, but you don't need to worry about anything. Everything is taken care of." I shook his hand, feeling the weight of responsibility settling onto my shoulders, but also feeling something I hadn't felt in years, which was hope. When I walked out of the notary's office into the bright Florida sunshine, I stood on the sidewalk for a long moment, holding that envelope against my chest, and I could almost hear my father's voice telling me that everything would be okay. But as I walked to my car, I noticed someone sitting on the hood, and my heart sank when I realized it was Jason, his arms crossed, his face dark with barely contained fury. He pushed off the car and walked toward me with slow, deliberate steps, and every instinct told me to run, but I held my ground because I was done being afraid of him. Jason stopped just inches from me, so close I could smell the expensive cologne mixed with the sharp scent of his anger, and he said in a low, dangerous voice, "You really think this is over, Angel? You think Daddy's little letter makes you untouchable?" I clutched the envelope tighter and said, "Jason, please, just let it go. Dad made his choice and we both have to live with it." He laughed, but there was no humor in it, only bitterness. "Let it go? You just stole my inheritance, my future, everything I worked for, and you expect me to just walk away?" I felt my own anger rising, and I shot back. "You didn't work for anything, Jason. You worked for yourself. You built your life while I sacrificed mine, and Dad saw that. He saw everything." His hand shot out and grabbed my wrist, not hard enough to hurt, but firm enough to stop me from walking away, and he hissed, "Listen to me very carefully, that building downtown. I know people, I know investors, and if you think you can manage a property worth millions with your zero experience, you're delusional." I yanked my wrist free and said, "Then I'll learn, and if I fail, at least I'll fail trying, which is more than you ever did for this family." Something flickered across his face, something that might have been hurt buried under layers of ego, and for a split second I almost felt sorry for him, but then he straightened up and his expression went cold again. "Fine, keep the house, keep the building, but don't come crying to me when it all falls apart, because I won't be there to save you." He turned and walked to his BMW, got in, and peeled out of the parking lot with a screech of tires, leaving me standing alone with the envelope still pressed against my heart. I drove home in a daze, my mind replaying everything that had happened, and when I pulled into the driveway of the house that was now officially mine, I sat in the car for 10 minutes just staring at the front door. Inside, I could hear the faint hum of Mom's oxygen machine, that constant companion that had become the soundtrack of my life, and I realized that despite everything that had changed, some things remained exactly the same. I walked inside and found Mom sitting in her recliner by the window, the afternoon light making her look smaller and more fragile than ever. But when she saw me, her eyes lit up. "Angel, mija, how did it go?" I knelt beside her chair and took her hand, her skin paper thin and cool to the touch, and I said, "We got the house, Mama. It's ours. Jason can't take it away." Her eyes filled with tears, and she squeezed my hand with surprising strength. "I knew your father would take care of you. He always said you were his angel." I smiled through my own tears and said, "He left me more than the house, Mama. He left me a building, too. One that makes money every month. Enough that we won't have to worry anymore." She looked confused for a moment, then understanding dawned on her face. "The building on Orange Avenue? He told me about that years ago, said it was for your future." I nodded, overwhelmed by how much my father had planned, how much he had protected me even after his death, and I said, "I'm going to take care of us, Mama. I promise." She reached up and touched my cheek. "You already have, mi amor. You already have." I spent the rest of the afternoon taking care of Mom, giving her medication, making dinner, doing all the small tasks that filled my days, but this time it felt different because I wasn't doing it with fear hanging over my head. That night, after Mom was asleep and the house was quiet, I finally sat down at the kitchen table and opened the envelope my father had left me. The paper inside was filled with his familiar handwriting, slightly shaky from his illness, but still unmistakably his, and I began to read through tears that blurred the words. My dearest angel, if you're reading this, then I'm gone and you've heard the will, and I hope you understand now why I did what I did. When I married Maria and you became my daughter, I thought I was giving you a father, but really you gave me something much greater. You showed me what unconditional love looks like. Jason is my biological son, and I love him, but I've watched him become someone who measures life in dollar signs and status symbols, and I've watched you become someone who measures life in moments of compassion and sacrifice. The house belongs to you because you made it a home. The building belongs to you because I want you to have freedom, the freedom to live without fear, to maybe go back to school someday, to find your own happiness without carrying the weight of financial stress. I know you'll want to share everything with your mother, and that's exactly who you are, but I'm asking you to also think about yourself, to invest in your own dreams, because you deserve to be more than a caretaker. You deserve to be everything you were meant to be. Jason will be angry, I know my son, but I hope one day he'll understand that I didn't love him less. I just needed to love you more because you needed it and because you earned it. Take care of your mother, but also take care of yourself. And know that every day you lived without complaint, every sacrifice you made without asking for recognition, I saw it all, and I was so proud to call you my daughter. With all my love, Dad. I sat there for a long time after finishing the letter, crying quietly at the kitchen table, and for the first time since my father died, I allowed myself to fully grieve, not just for him, but for all the years I'd lost, all the dreams I'd put aside, all the parts of myself I'd buried under responsibility. But mixed with the grief was something else, something that felt like possibility, and I realized that my father's gift wasn't just money or property, it was permission to live again. The next morning, I woke up early and made a list of everything I needed to do, practical things like meeting with the trust attorney and learning about property management, but also personal things like finding a support nurse for Mom so I could have a few hours a week to myself. I was sitting at the kitchen table with my coffee when my phone rang, an unknown number with a local area code, and when I answered, a professional female voice said, Miss Rivera, this is Catherine Chen from Morrison & Associates. I'm the attorney managing your father's trust. Do you have time to meet this week? I scheduled an appointment for Thursday, and over the next few days I threw myself into understanding my new reality, reading everything I could find about property management, rental agreements, and commercial real estate. On Thursday, I met Catherine at her office downtown, and she turned out to be a sharp woman in her 40s who treated me with respect rather than the condescension I'd expected. Your father set this up very carefully, Miss Rivera. The building has 6 commercial tenants, all with long-term leases, and we have a property management company that handles day-to-day operations, so you don't need to do much except collect the income and make major decisions. I felt relief wash over me. So I don't have to suddenly become an expert? Catherine smiled. Not at all. Your father hired experts for that. Your job is just to oversee them and make sure your interests are protected, which is where I come in. She walked me through the financial statements, showing me that after expenses and management fees, the building netted about $12,000 per month, and I had to sit down because I'd never imagined having that kind of money. What am I supposed to do with all that? Catherine's smile widened. Whatever you want, Miss Rivera. Pay off debts, invest it, save it, spend it. It's yours. I thought about my mother's medical bills, the credit cards I'd maxed out over the years buying her medications, and I said, First, I want to pay off our debts, all of them. Catherine nodded approvingly. Smart choice. And after that? I took a deep breath. Then I want to hire help for my mother so I can go back to school. I only had 1 year left before I had to drop out. Her expression softened. Your father would be proud, Miss Rivera, and for what it's worth, I think you're going to do great. Over the next month, my life transformed in ways I never could have imagined. I paid off $30,000 in medical debt, hired a wonderful nurse named Patricia to help with Mom 4 days a week, and enrolled in online classes to finish my degree in social work. But the biggest change was internal. I started to remember who I was before I became just the caregiver. I started to remember that I had dreams and ambitions and a whole life waiting to be lived. Then, one Saturday afternoon, exactly 6 weeks after the notary meeting, someone knocked on my door, and when I opened it, I found Jason standing there, but he looked different. His expensive suit was wrinkled, his hair was messy, and there were dark circles under his eyes. He didn't speak immediately, just stood there looking at the ground, and I was so shocked to see him that I couldn't find words either, until finally I said, "Jason, what are you doing here?" He raised his eyes to meet mine, and I saw something I'd never seen before in my stepbrother's face, which was genuine vulnerability. "Can I come in?" "I need to talk to you." Every instinct told me to slam the door in his face, but something in his expression made me hesitate, and I finally stepped aside. "5 minutes, and if you upset my mother, I'll call the police." He nodded and walked into the living room, his usual swagger completely gone, and he stood awkwardly in the center of the room like he didn't know what to do with his hands. "Is she asleep?" I crossed my arms. "She's resting, now say what you came to say." Jason took a shaky breath. "I lost everything, Angel, my job, my apartment, my car, everything." I felt a spike of alarm despite my anger. "What happened?" He laughed bitterly and sat down on the couch without being invited. "Turns out I wasn't as successful as I thought. I was living on credit, expensive credit, and when I tried to lawyer up and fight the will, I couldn't afford it. And then my boss found out I'd been using company resources for personal business and I got fired." Part of me wanted to feel vindicated, to tell him he got exactly what he deserved, but another part of me, the part my father had always praised, felt something closer to pity. "Why are you telling me this?" He looked up at me with red-rimmed eyes. "Because I have nowhere else to go. I've been sleeping in my car for the past week. Except they repossessed my car 3 days ago, so now I'm sleeping on a friend's couch, and I realized something." I waited, not offering any comfort, and he continued. "I realized that the person I looked down on, the person I thought was worthless, was actually the only one in this family who knew what really mattered, and I was too blind and stupid to see it." I sat down in the chair across from him, maintaining distance. "Jason, if you're here asking for money..." He shook his head violently. "I'm not. I'm desperate, but I'm not that low yet. I came here to apologize, to actually apologize, not because I want something, but because you deserve to hear it." I studied his face, looking for signs of manipulation, but all I saw was exhaustion and genuine remorse. "I'm listening." Jason leaned forward, his elbows on his knees. "I was cruel to you. I made you feel worthless when you were doing the hardest work imaginable. I dismissed your sacrifice because it didn't come with a paycheck. And I'm sorry. I'm so sorry, Angel." I felt tears prickling at my eyes, but I blinked them back. "Do you know what hurt the most? It wasn't that you wanted the house, it was that you made me feel invisible, like all those years of caring for Mom meant nothing." He nodded, his own eyes filling with tears. "I know, and you're right. I only cared about things I could put on a resume, things I could brag about, and I missed the whole point of being alive." We sat in silence for a moment, and I heard Mom's oxygen machine humming in the background, that familiar sound that had been my anchor for so long. "What do you want from me, Jason?" He wiped his eyes roughly. "Nothing, honestly nothing. I just wanted you to know that Dad was right about everything. He saw who we really were, and he made the right choice. And I'm sorry it took losing everything for me to see it too." I surprised myself by saying, "Are you hungry? Have you eaten today?" He looked startled. No, I haven't." I stood up and walked to the kitchen. "Come on, I'll make you a sandwich, and then we're going to talk about what happens next." Jason followed me like a lost puppy, and as I pulled out bread and cold cuts, he said, "Why are you being nice to me after everything I did?" I paused with the knife in my hand. because someone once told me that success isn't measured by what you take, but by what you give, and I'm choosing to give you a chance, not because you earned it, but because that's who I want to be." He started crying then, really crying, and I let him, because sometimes people need to break down before they can build themselves back up. When he'd composed himself, I slid the sandwich across the table. "Eat, and then we're going to make a plan." Jason looked at me with disbelief. "A plan?" I nodded. "You can't stay on your friend's couch forever, and despite everything, you're still my brother. So here's what's going to happen. There's a small room above the garage. It's not fancy, but it's dry and safe. You can stay there temporarily while you get back on your feet." His mouth fell open. "Angel, I can't ask you to—" I held up my hand. "You're not asking. I'm offering, but there are conditions. You get a job, any job. I don't care if it's flipping burgers or stocking shelves. You work and you save money and you help out around here. Grocery shopping, yard work, whatever needs doing." Jason nodded eagerly. "Yes, anything. I'll do anything." I continued. "And you apologize to Mom, a real apology, and you spend time with her because she's not going to be here forever, and you've wasted too many years already." He wiped his eyes. "I will. I promise I will." Over the next few months, something miraculous happened. Jason moved into the garage apartment, and true to his word, he got a job at a local hardware store. It wasn't glamorous and the pay was modest, but he showed up every day and worked hard. More importantly, he started spending time with Mom. At first it was awkward and stilted, but gradually they found their rhythm, and I'd come home from class to find them watching old movies together or Jason reading to her from the newspaper. One evening, I came home to find him in the kitchen attempting to cook dinner. The kitchen was a disaster zone with pots everywhere and something burning in the oven, but he was trying, and that mattered more than the result. I laughed and said, "What are you making?" He grimaced. "It was supposed to be lasagna, but I think I've created a crime against Italian cuisine." I pushed him aside. "Go sit with Mom, I'll fix this." As he walked away, he paused and said, "Thank you, Angel, for everything. I don't deserve your kindness, but I'm grateful for it every single day." I smiled. "You're welcome. Now go. She likes it when you tell her about your day." That night after Mom was asleep, Jason and I sat on the back porch with iced tea, and he said, "I've been saving money. I have about $2,000 now, and I wanted to ask you something." I raised an eyebrow. "What's that?" He looked nervous. "The trust attorney, Catherine, she mentioned that you might expand the business, maybe buy another property, and I was wondering if you'd let me invest my savings, not as a gift, but as a real investment. I want to learn how this works. I want to be part of building something instead of just taking." I was quiet for a moment, then I said, "Okay, but we do it properly, legal documents, everything official, and you need to understand that real estate is risky. You could lose that money." He nodded seriously. "I understand, but I trust you, Angel. And more than that, I want to prove that I've changed, that I can be someone Dad would have been proud of." 3 months later, we closed on a small duplex that needed renovation. Jason used his savings plus a loan I co-signed to purchase a 10% stake, and he spent his weekends learning construction by helping with the repairs. Watching him hammer nails and paint walls covered in sweat and dust but smiling, I realized that my father's final gift wasn't just to me, it was to both of us. He gave me security, but he also gave Jason the chance to fall and learn to get back up. A year after that infamous meeting at the notary's office, I graduated with my degree in social work. Mom was there in her wheelchair, Patricia by her side, and Jason was there too, cheering louder than anyone when they called my name. At the celebration dinner that night, Mom raised her glass of water and said, "Your father would be so proud of both of you. You've become the family he always dreamed we could be." Jason reached over and squeezed my hand. "We couldn't have done it without Angel. She saved me when she had every right to let me fall." I squeezed back. "We saved each other. That's what family does." 2 years later, on a warm spring evening, I was working in my new office. I'd opened a small nonprofit helping other caregivers navigate resources and find support, something I'd wished I'd had during my darkest years, when Jason knocked on the doorframe. He looked different now, more grounded, more real. He'd been promoted to assistant manager at the hardware store and was taking business classes at night, and he'd paid back his investment in the duplex 3 times over. "Got a minute?" I smiled. "Always. What's up?" He sat down across from my desk. "I wanted to show you something." He pulled out a folder and slid it across to me. Inside was a purchase agreement for a small house. Modest, but nice, in a good neighborhood. "I'm moving out. I saved enough for a down payment, and I wanted you to know that it's time." I felt tears spring to my eyes, but they were happy tears. "Jason, that's wonderful. I'm so proud of you." He grinned. "I'm proud of me too, but I couldn't have gotten here without you believing in me when nobody else did, including myself." We hugged. A real hug, not the awkward half-embrace of distant relatives, but the tight squeeze of people who'd been through fire together and come out stronger. Later that night I sat with Mom in her room. Her health had declined, but she was still sharp as ever, and she said, "Your father was a smart man, Angel. He knew exactly what would happen." Mom held my hand and said, "Your father knew that giving you everything would force Jason to face himself, and that you were strong enough to help him when he was ready." 3 months later, Mom passed away peacefully. At the funeral, Jason spoke through tears. "Maria wasn't my biological mother, but she loved me anyway, even when I was cruel to her daughter." Attorney Catherine gave me a letter. Mom had left Jason $25,000. Her letter read, "Watching you and Jason become real siblings was the happiest time of my life." When I called Jason, his voice broke. "She didn't have to do that." "Yes, she did, because that's what mothers do," I replied. 6 months later, at my nonprofit's opening, Jason was there. "Dad would be so proud," he said. "We built it together," I answered. I thought about that day in the notary's office when Jason expected everything and lost it all. The greatest gifts sometimes come wrapped in the hardest lessons. 5 years later, Jason got married. At the wedding, I said, "Jason was first my stepbrother, then my antagonist, but eventually became my real brother." Jason wiped his eyes. "You had every reason never to forgive me, but you gave me a chance to become someone worth forgiving." Dad didn't just distribute assets. He taught us that everything can be lost and rebuilt, that people can change. That broken Jason is gone, replaced by a real brother. The paper I kept in my pocket is now framed in my office, a reminder that justice sometimes looks like mercy. My name is Angel Rivera. I'm 30. I run an organization serving hundreds of families, and I have a real brother. When the notary read the will, Jason thought he'd lost everything, but we both won something we didn't know we needed, the chance to become the people our parents always believed we could be. And that was more valuable than any inheritance.